Hi, I'm Shayna.
And I'm Tracy, and we are the creators of The Pump and Dump Show. We are moms, but we were women first. And in this podcast, we explore what it's like to be a woman who also happens to be a mom.
Before we were moms, we were women. Before we were moms, we were chillin'. We were pumping and dumping. We're talking about something. This is the Pump and Dump Podcast.
Welcome back, breeders.
What's up, breeders?
What up?
We are going to talk about
Your pelvic floor and our pelvic floor.
the pelvic floor,
The pelvic floor.
which apparently is part of your core.
Yeah, didn't know that. Which apparently is just a series of intricately woven muscles.
And I feel like it's a very common thing to have issues with your pelvic floor and not realize that you do. And not realize that there are things you can do to give yourself a better life. It's related to back issues. It's related to postnatal issues, incontinence issues, so many things, pelvic floor.
So many things. And once again, it's one of those things that we don't just have to put up with as women. There are ways to fix it. If you are leaking or if you have pain, all those things can actually be fixed. It's not that you're just broken, which is
We're taught as
fascinating.
women just to deal with.
Yeah. And we all have something. We all have something, and it happens. Certainly, your pelvic floor problems kick in postpartum, and that can apparently happen with a vaginal birth or a C-section. So let's talk about it.
We brought in an expert. She is a physical therapist who specializes in pelvic floor dysfunction, which we will also find out what that means. And we hope that even if one mom needs to hear this today,
Yeah.
that she's listening.
We got a special guest. Special guest.
Super excited for our guest today. We have Lea Klein, who is a physical therapist specializing in pelvic floor dysfunction. She's a mom of 3, and she just loves to help the vajayjay. That's her mission in life.
And all of the surrounding.
And all of the surroundings, because I understand it's obviously not just your vajay. But Lea, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Do you want to clarify what pelvic floor dysfunction really means?
Yes, it's a wide variety of different things, but it's dysfunction really anywhere from the back side of your pelvis to the underside to even really the front side in your lower abs.
Okay. And then why does it dysfunction?
There are so many different things. So some people have dysfunction who have never even had kids before.
Okay.
I'm always surprised at the amount of people who are even in their 20s. I've even treated a high schooler or 2 with both pain and leakage, even in high school.
Wow.
Before having kids. But labor and delivery, unfortunately, does cause a lot of trauma to our bodies. And so that's where a lot of the dysfunction starts, I believe.
Okay. So we're going to focus on postpartum pelvic floor health, for lack of a better word, and you're just going to walk us through it and explain all of these things, because Shane and I know nothing.
Well, and I, of course we can maybe get to this, but you were saying that labor and delivery is responsible, but isn't also just carrying a baby.
Yes.
So pre-labor,
yes,
and delivery,
Gestation.
pregnancy, gestation, all affects it. And it's one of those things that, like, you don't even know you have a problem,
right,
until you know it's a thing.
Yeah. So how do we start from the beginning, Lea? Okay. Like, what is your pelvic floor? What is that?
So your pelvic floor comprises of a lot of different muscles that attach to your pubic bone, your sits bones, but it's basically a layer of muscles that lines the whole bottom side of your pelvis.
Okay.
That's what your pelvic floor is.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of different functions. So it obviously controls bowel and bladder function. It's part of your core, which a lot of people don't know. It holds up all of your pelvic organs, and then it's also responsible for sexual function as well.
This is just the muscles.
Yes.
One muscle or several
No,
muscles?
there's a lot of muscles.
Okay.
Like a layering of muscles.
Mm-hmm.
And they do all those things.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, why does nobody know what all of this is, like especially women?
That's a really good question. I still can't figure it out. I think a lot of women definitely don't like to talk about it. And it's, surprisingly, for this being my profession, and I'm not exempt from having these issues after having 3 babies. And it's even hard for me to talk about it sometimes with my friends. So it's not an easy thing that you just go around talking about, in
And what
detail.
are we talking about? Or not talking about, rather?
Yes, exactly. So really leakage of any kind that's involuntary. So
when you say leakage, you just mean urine, right?
there's bowel leakage as well.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Oh,
Okay.
God, it sucks to be a woman.
And that's definitely a little more rare, but it's one thing that it can be really detrimental if you're dealing with it, right? Because you definitely don't want to go around talking
Which,
about
I
that.
mean, now that you say that, though, it paints me a better picture of like how big the area is and how much those muscles are. Because you just, you think leakage, you think, oh, well, I just peed a little, but it can go in the back and you can poop a little.
Yep.
Well, especially if you like blew it out in delivery. I mean, I'm familiar with, not personally, but I just know so many people who've been like, yeah, I had to have surgery. I like blew it out.
Blew what out?
Their butts.
Oh.
I know. Well, this is off to a great start.
Okay, so leakage of any kind.
These things
Sorry,
I talk
Lea.
Please
about
stop
all
saying the
day
word
long.
leakage, by the way. Okay.
Dripping? Is dripping better? That's not better.
Nothing's okay. So you are a physical therapist who got interested in the pelvic floor when and how?
Yes. So good question. I became a physical therapist in 2001, and then several years in, I really started specializing in treating low back pain, sacroiliac dysfunction, which is the joints that form in our pelvis. And
What's it called?
Sacroiliac.
Okay.
The sacroiliac joint. So the sacrum, which is the lowest part of your spine, forms a joint with your pelvis.
Okay.
And that is on the backside, those bony spots on the backside of your back that you can feel. That's your SI joint.
Okay.
And so because I started specializing in treating those things, I started just naturally treating more and more pregnant and postpartum women. And that became my passion. And I feel like the pregnant, but even more the postpartum population is a very underserved population in our culture. And I, especially becoming a mom, I specialized in pelvic floor dysfunction before I even became a mom, but I became even more passionate after experiencing what I did and then realizing how much we can help.
Okay.
So in 2007, 6 years later, I decided I would go for it and I would go take the specialized courses and just see what I thought. And it just, one thing spiraled to another, and I just discovered how much I love treating it.
So when women come to you, how do women finally find you? How do they get to that place?
So fortunately, what I would say is when you ask the question about people talking about it, at least I feel like from 2007 till today, there's not only a lot more physical therapists treating it, but there's also more knowledge surrounding it. So luckily, I do have several doctors that know about it because I've spoken with them about it and they believe in it and they do send patients to me. But I would say the vast majority of patients are past patients of mine, then talking to their friends, and then their friends realizing that they have a problem, and it's more word of mouth, I feel like.
Well, because for doctors, isn't it the go-to just to go get a mesh thing put in?
Not for all, but unfortunately that is still first line of defense for leakage.
Right. Because I remember like my mom had some sort of surgery going on, and she's not going to be very happy that I'm telling everyone that she got the mesh. Sorry. Anyway, she got the mesh, and I'm at the hospital like when she was going into surgery, and her doctor, like I made a joke about it, like that I'd had a baby and might need the mesh, and she was like, "Oh yeah, come see me. It takes just a second." Like it was so like, "Oh yeah, that's just what you do. You just get the mesh."
So rather than strengthening the muscles and fixing the problem internally, the standard procedure is just, and what is, to explain what the mesh is for people who don't know.
Because it's officially called the mesh now.
Capital T.
Well, they're basically suturing mesh, inside in order to, so a lot of times leakage is caused due to prolapse, which is a whole nother topic we haven't even discussed.
Right.
But it's a falling down of, and it can be a number of different organs. So you can have a prolapse of your bladder, you can have a prolapse of your uterus, your rectum can even prolapse, your urethra can prolapse. So it's basically any of those organs falling down and being in a position they're not supposed to be in. And that can give a sensation of a falling out feeling or pressure, kind of a constant pressure down there. But then it can also contribute to leakage as well.
And why do our organs prolapse?
So I like to talk about the fact that from our ribs all the way down to our tailbone, it forms a canister, if you will, and there's a mismanaging of pressure in the system in that canister. So if you have an excess amount of intra-abdominal pressure in your abdomen,
Are you saying like from a baby?
yes,
Or-
that's one reason,
okay.
but chronic constipation, so chronic straining can also cause prolapse. Excessive impact, so sometimes it happens in runners that run a lot, so just a lot of high impact activity, but just straining of any kind. And I even think that a lot of people don't know how to adequately contract their core. So if they're even doing Pilates or doing other forms of exercise, engaging their core, and they're not doing it correctly, you can be straining and putting pressure on your pelvic floor.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank God I don't run.
Just another reason
Just another
to add to the
reason
list. I can't
confirm
run
my-
because I might prolapse.
Sure. Seems good to me. Okay, so they prolapse. Your organs can prolapse, and that's what causes.
And then the mesh, yeah, they're supporting everything.
That's just the easy fix.
It's
medically.
So what it just basically is like, I'm just imagining it's basically just in case so it doesn't fall out, essentially. I mean,
Yeah.
what is it really doing?
That's a good question. They're so to speak, they're tightening everything up.
Oh,
so
okay.
they can even add stability to the urethra if there's urethral instability with those surgeries.
Okay. So do you approve of these surgeries, or?
There's absolutely patients that I do think if they go down the pelvic floor PT route and they are still having a substantial amount of leakage, those patients I absolutely think are appropriate. And, grade 4 prolapse, so there's different grades, and a grade 4 prolapse cannot be helped by PT. So that's another surgical situation. And a lot of women do great with the surgery. It's just not a walk in the park. So for these moms who have little kiddos that they're picking up all day long, it's a pretty intense surgery that you're really not supposed to lift for a good 6 weeks after. So it's
impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always say, there's a lot of these procedures being done, and a lot of them most of them probably go great, but I always see the ones that have problems later. So sometimes women will then have an alternate problem after, where they're experiencing pain or they're experiencing almost like an increase in urgency or frequency to urinate
After you've been
because you're stitching up the area. There's obviously going to be scar tissue, and some people make more scar tissue than others. So,
all right. Well, let's go back to having to moms and postnatal care, because what I've heard about pelvic floor therapy is that it should be required for every mom post baby, no matter what kind of birth you had. It's important medical care that we just don't know about.
I would agree. I get on my soapbox and I'm passionate about it, but yes, I feel like almost I would say every woman that's ever come to see me for PT postpartum does not regret coming, because they leave learning so much. Just learning how to coordinate it. I think it needs to be a coordinated muscle to know how to move your body the right way, how to use it to help you lift things. We're lifting so much all day long. We're schlepping groceries around and picking up our kids and doing laundry and all of those things. And I think it's important to know how to engage that to help even with low back pain.
Shay and I always say, like, the major source of our back pain is from doing laundry.
Yeah,
Like,
my back
every
doesn't
time
hurt
I do it.
It's like household work actually where my back hurts the most. That's why we got our bionic slippers because like it's just those hours in the kitchen
And it's just up and down and
Or-
up and down and bending and lowering and bending and lowering. And
Yeah.
it just kills me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's normal.
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, a part of it is biomechanics of how you're lifting, right? But then I love the term, you guys will love this, but I tell a lot of my patients as we're trying to get back into function and get back into their daily lives, I'll tell them to remember to blow before they go. So before you do anything, like before you lift your child or before you lift the laundry basket, to just exhale because that helps you engage your lower abs and engage your pelvic floor.
Ooh, okay.
So the kegel always is supposed to happen on the exhale. That's a big, a
Oh,
lot of
really?
women want to do it when they inhale.
You're all doing it now.
Uh-huh.
Okay, blow before. So exhale before you bend over or pick up a kiddo.
Because
As
then
you exert,
tighten.
really, like before you lift that object,
Okay.
you want to exhale.
Now let's talk about kegels.
Okay.
Go.
Okay. Do you want to hear some of my cueing that I use?
Well, I mean, when I was pregnant, I remember like reading something that was like, you need to practice your kegels every day and you need to do like 3 sets of 30 or something like that. And I just couldn't be bothered.
And a kegel is where you just like, what is the actual like movement? What are you doing?
Right. So you're not engaging ideally, you're not engaging your inner thighs or your glutes.
Mm-hmm.
You are on an exhale. You are drawing those muscles up and in. So
I'm literally trying to do it right now.
I'm doing it right now.
we use the terms, there's lots of different terms, but you can say close the openings. A lot of times I will cue women, and this is another reason I love doing what I do, because a lot of women come in doing them incorrectly. And so they may still not be at least bearing down, but they might be engaging a little bit the wrong way, like gripping, being a little bit too grippy rather than having that lift, that close and lift. So I love to use a whole bunch of different cues as I'm assessing it, and then I tell them which cue that they do it
to.
right.
So
right.
what are your cues?
So like I said, closing the anus opening. That actually is a
Okay.
I'm 10 years old. I am 10 years old and I'm about to giggle.
I know. I'm going to try to do it and I don't.
Are you closing your anus opening?
I'm
right
trying
now?
to.
You're trying to.
I don't know that how do you know it's closed? All right,
I
close
don't know.
the anus opening.
Well, that's a good question for Lea. How do you know people are doing it correctly? Do you put your hand down
She gets
there?
all in there, yeah.
Yeah. It's internal assessment.
Oh, okay. Start
Yep.
there. What?
Oh, you didn't know this?
No.
Okay. So yes, I have gloves on and I'm not using speculum or anything like it. Don't think of it like you're going in for your pap smear because it's not quite that invasive, I don't think.
Okay.
It's just use of my index finger, and I'm not only palpating all of the muscles to see if there's any trigger points in them, but I'm also assessing for prolapse to see if I see anything, entering into that vaginal wall. And then I am asking the patient to do a Kegel for me. And I'm not only assessing can they do it correctly, but what is the strength of their contraction? What's the endurance? So can they hold it for a full 10 seconds?
How
should
are
be
you
able to hold it for
assessing-
10 seconds?
Because she'll feel the closing close.
Yeah.
The opening will close on her finger.
But with the anal opening?
Oh, you can feel, so the muscles, there are more anterior muscles, more toward the front side of your body, and there are more posterior, but just by giving that cue, the vagina closes as well.
Okay. That's what I was like. Are
That's a good
people
question.
like, I'm going to go get my pelvic floor work done and now someone's going to put a finger at my butt? But no. I'm being clear for our audience here.
We're focusing on the
sometimes do that.
postpartum population, but
Right.
males have a pelvic floor as well. They only tend to
deserve
have
a pelvic
floor.
Who cares? Cry me a frickin' river.
So obviously there's not a hole.
We've never man bashed in our whole career, but today they don't
is the
deserve
day.
a pelvic fucking floor.
Well, if they do, they can deal with it like we do.
Okay,
if
we're
I,
sorry.
If I go in to see Leah and some man is in front of me and it's making me wait for her, I am pissed. I
Yeah.
am sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, I take it back. I love men. Keep going.
Okay, so it's not always that there will be a finger in the butt. It's
That's right.
mostly in the vaginal canal.
Yes.
So you can feel all of the muscles and the way that they're working.
Yes.
And so I guess you know why I'm so surprised about this is because I know that you work at the Pilates studio where Clara works, and now I'm just picturing you out in the Pilates area.
She has a
with
lovely,
a glove on her hand.
a lovely office with a closed door.
That's what I figured. Okay,
Yes.
now I'm
No,
learning.
she's not
this.
putting someone on a reformer machine.
Right, she's like put a leg up.
It's the collective part of Pilates.
I get
collective.
it now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never been there. Got it.
Okay. So you're testing to see the strength and everything
Mhm.
of the kegles. What else do we need to know about kegles? I mean, do you think everyone's doing it wrong? Like, is it worth it to just try to do them on your own?
Is it worth
or-
it to do the like 30 every? I mean, like
Yeah,
what
are we
I was
supposed to
supposed
do?
to be doing.
I think there still is a lot of there's a lot of discrepancy out there still. I tend to say that because there is such a thing as a too tight of a pelvic floor as well. So
That's what I have. I definitely have that.
okay.
How did I know you were going to say that?
So we don't want to overdo because the pelvic floor is working all day long when we're doing core exercises or we're lifting and, kneading our core. It has to
Mhm.
contract. So I tend to say if you can get 3 different sets in throughout your day, and I typically focus on that 10-second, 10 rep. But once again, if a patient can only do 5-second holds and then they drop the contraction and they can only do it 2 times or 3 times.
Oh, you're holding for 10 seconds.
Yes.
You're not squeeze.
So good question. So there are endurance contractions and then there's quick contractions. So the quick contractions are supposed to occur over a 1 to 2 second period and then relax over 1 to 2 seconds. So a lot
But
of
still
women,
not even that quick. So it's less quick than what I think you and I were thinking of.
Yes.
Yeah.
a lot of women come in and they're just kind of
Yeah.
doing this.
Yeah.
Yes. No one can see what I just did.
No one
but
can see it, but she did some real squeezy hand thing. So we get it. Everyone gets it.
Got it.
So
okay.
yes, there's 2 different types of contractions
That you recommend.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Depending on the problem, I'll recommend one more than another. So if you have too tight of a pelvic floor, I feel like those patients really need to work on relaxing more than their contraction.
Let me ask you this. Is too tight of a pelvic floor related to painful sex?
Yes.
And okay.
Yes, definitely.
And too tight, can that continue to happen if you've had a vaginal birth?
Yeah.
Yes, I will tell you yes.
Yeah.
Okay, you're tight. We get it. Can you become too tight? Like, can it over contract, or is it just how you are? Like, how does?
Well, I think that we have to remember that all of those muscles are innervated by the muscles coming off of our spine. And so if there's low back dysfunction or there's pain somewhere else or there's any reason that would cause hip dysfunction, even any of those other dysfunctions can cause those muscles to overfire. They're trying to help protect and they become too tight, which is then adding to the problem, if that makes sense.
And then so Shay touched on that. So that causes painful sex. What else happens?
Sometimes tailbone pain. So the technical term is coccydynia, but an intolerance to sitting or feeling like your tailbone is bruised.
Oh.
Though that can be caused from the muscles being too tight. It can also be caused because the tailbone is in an incorrect position. So,
right.
We assess that and treat that as well.
Is it true that if you break your tailbone, there's nothing you can do about it?
True. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I broke my tailbone on my wedding day.
Really?
Yeah.
That's super painful, right?
Yeah, it was really bad. It was like the night before my wedding.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I hopped in a car and just landed my ass really hard on a seatbelt plastic part. And like it was spasming, like that painful spasm.
Mhm.
I mean, and there was just nothing I could do. And I still have issues like
Do you?
in like yoga, if they ask us to roll up, like rock and
Mhm.
roll up to your feet, like I have to do it on like one side if I go directly over my tailbone.
So does that mean it just has like a fracture in it, like forever, or what does a broken
Yeah.
tailbone mean?
Yeah.
Well, it does. It eventually heals, but what I would say is it shouldn't be painful this far out. So right? Because the fracture.
I mean, it was 13 years
Yeah,
ago.
right.
Yeah.
So the fracture should be healed within,
Yeah.
8
maybe
weeks.
I'm just sensitive about it.
But the muscles, I think sometimes whenever there's trauma like that, then because the tailbone should move, it should have a little bit of movement in it. So it might have just tightened down after the fracture healed, or the muscles may have kind of gotten into a tightened state and then they had a hard time relaxing.
Because you have low back pain.
I do. And it's low. It's like low.
Mm-hmm.
But so let's go back to postpartum stuff. So
Okay.
what do you think the most common postpartum issue is regarding pelvic floor? Like if,
That's a
if what
toss-up.
we say is true, that like everybody postpartum should get pelvic floor strengthening help in order to relieve either current pain or just to recover from pregnancy or just to recover from the actual vaginal birth. What is the like most common thing you see that people haven't treated that people really need it for, I guess is what I'm saying.
So the most obvious answer would be leakage. But I
Okay.
think I don't know what the statistics are as far as that goes. I would say I treat a lot of pain. So whether it's prolapse, just discomfort from the prolapse feeling, or pain with intercourse, that's probably right up there with the leakage. But I feel like it's usually one or the other.
And so there's women out there just living in pain, not realizing that they can strengthen their.
I think so.
So the
There's
pain
many
can be
people-
remedied.
Yes. Yes.
The intercourse pain.
yes.
Is there any? So you basically have intercourse pain or prolapse pain. Are those the two? Is there anything else we should like?
There's
think about
different
or-
nerve injuries that can happen from giving birth as well, and there's so many different ones. We don't need to go into them, but if you have any kind of numbness in that perineal region or even down the back of the leg, or I'm just trying to think. So one of the more common nerve injuries is a pudendal neuralgia, but I wouldn't say that that's necessarily just from labor and delivery. It can be caused from a number of different things.
Like
but
what?
Like a lot of people, especially here in Colorado, are doing CrossFit and squatting with heavy weight past 90 degrees of hip flexion. So with a heavy weight, that heavy load can really traction that nerve.
Oh, interesting.
And that causes numbness in your leg.
It doesn't cause numbness. That one in particular is more pain.
Okay.
Um,
Where's the pain coming from? Your hips?
It's so the pudendal nerve goes through the pelvic floor.
Oh, okay.
And then
wow.
is a branch off of the sciatic nerve. So the pain is really just on the inside of your sits bone. Just people say it's up in there, but it's, if you picture where your sit bone is, it's up and in from there, and then it can travel down the back of the leg.
Okay.
So some people think that they have sciatica, but they really have that.
Interesting.
Let's talk about treatment. So like somebody comes to see you.
Mm-hmm.
What do they expect from a pelvic floor
That's a great question.
therapy session?
So I think so many people think that it is just internal work, or maybe they don't even think that.
Or you're me and you had no idea.
So there's a surprising amount of external work as well, because if you're a good physical therapist that treats the pelvic floor, you're looking at all of it. So you're looking at the alignment of the pelvis, you're looking at the lumbar spine, and even up into the thoracic spine, which is more your mid-back. And we're assessing movement through that area. I always start my patients standing, and I put them through a functional assessment standing. So I watch them move, and I ask them to do a whole bunch of different things. And I'm just getting a feel for where are they tight? How do they move, right? Mm-hmm. Are they guarding anywhere? Is there an asymmetry of their right versus their left hip? And then
Isn't there always?
Almost always, yes. Yeah. And then I get them on the table, and I'm assessing more range of motion, strength, alignment. And so I'm putting all of those pieces together and thinking as I'm looking at all of that. And then usually toward the end is when I actually assess the pelvic floor. And I always tell people, we don't have to do that, especially at the beginning. Mm-hmm. I mean, so many people don't want that.
Sure.
And it's a very intimate area, and I realize that. So we can start externally. We can even start with external palpation to those areas without me putting my finger inside.
And
so
it feels to me like I would be nervous that it's painful. You know, if I'm already having
Right.
issues
That's a great question.
with pain, then I'm just like, oh God, here comes the finger. Like this is gonna
or
hurt.
like if you relax and you're just gonna pee everywhere or something. You know, I mean, I
Right.
imagine people you just hold yourself so differently when you feel like things change down there that
True.
if you're being asked to be examined or whatever, you're just like, I can't do that, you know?
Yeah, and that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up because it brings up another good point, is that so many people think that because they have leakage, they're weak and that they need to just strengthen, strengthen, strengthen. A surprising number of people who leak are actually too tight and their pelvic floor can't go through the full range of motion. So in order for a muscle to be strong, so think of your bicep muscle, for it to be strong, it has to be able to lengthen all the way, and you're supposed to have good elbow extension, and then it needs to be able to go through its full range of motion to contract and be strong. If you're in a contracted state, so your bicep is contracted for whatever reason, and you can't lengthen all the way, you're not nearly as strong. And so I always explain it to my patients that if your muscle is up a little higher, you know, in this contracted state throughout the day, it can't contract even more when you jump or you sneeze or you cough or you laugh.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's like it's at its
It's
max.
at its max, and it's maxed out, and it just can't perform that function for you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does make sense. I never knew that was possible.
Well, it makes a lot of sense to me.
So some women, it's not always, but some women say after even the first visit of me doing some of the release work and working on those areas and then teaching them a good diaphragmatic breath where they're inhaling into their belly and letting the pelvic floor drop and relax. So if you practice that, you know, inhaling into your nose, letting your belly fill, and feeling your pelvic floor just drop just ever so slightly into the chair. If they learn that relaxation, they already sometimes after the first visit come back and say their leakage is less.
Well, that was my next question actually, is like how long should people expect to need to work with somebody like you? I mean, does it just depend on how severe their case is?
It does. Some of the painful intercourse that I think is largely in part due to a scar or tearing, you know, like that area needing to heal. And so we're really doing a lot of manual work surrounding that scar and then treating those muscles. That can take a little bit longer. But I would say almost everyone should notice a difference within 3 to 4 visits.
So I have a couple questions. One, I want to talk about if you have a C-section.
Okay.
Does that change anything?
That's a great question.
And then I'm still curious about the cues that women, I mean, I guess it's a mindset shift because I feel like we all just accept that we pee a little when we laugh or cough or something, or it's, you know, it hurt to have sex the other night, but I must just be dry.
Mm-hmm.
Or I just think there's a lot of misconceptions of actually what that pain is or what the functions are. And I guess I want to be real clear on like what we should look out for to really understand it. Because I feel like I've had more reproductive issues than anyone I know, and I still don't freaking understand myself, you know?
No, that's a great question. So you mean how would someone know if they have dysfunction?
Yeah.
Yes. So some of them we've already touched on. So prolapse being a feeling or sensation of falling out, or that you have a golf ball that you're sitting on, or pressure. Those are the main complaints there. And then tailbone pain, any sort of pain with intercourse, any involuntary leakage. And that's also, we haven't touched on it, but there's also a lot of urge incontinence out there, which is that you feel an intense urge to go to the bathroom. And that's going back to the cesarean section because of the scar tissue in that area. So just beneath that scar, really pretty darn close to it, starts our pelvic floor. So I feel like women tend to have more of the issues of an increase in urgency or frequency, or possibly painful intercourse after C-section. Yeah, I love to tell the story about, it always helps my patients feel like there's hope. But, you know, a patient of mine once years ago, she came into me and she had been married for about 10 years, and she happened to have her 3 babies fairly close together and had 3 C-sections pretty close together. And she began having painful intercourse, and she hadn't had intercourse with her husband in 2 years when she came to see me, because No one was referring her, and she didn't realize that it was a thing. She didn't think there could be any problem with her pelvic floor because she had C-sections, right?
Yeah.
And she did amazingly well. But a lot of it is releasing the pelvic floor, releasing the scar tissue in the lower abdomen.
And that's another thing nobody really understands, I suppose, on the like consumer side. Scar tissue is a big deal.
Yes. And we're not actually mechanically breaking up scar tissue.
Okay.
So I always like to be clear on that too, because that's nearly impossible. It's really more of a neurological release that happens by talking to the nerves that are close to the skin. But I diverged a little bit. Sorry.
Okay.
Going back to urge incontinence, that I think tends to be a little bit more often after a C-section, but it's feeling an urgency to pee and then feeling like you truly can't make it in time, and then you leak on the way to the restroom, or you leak as you put your key in the door, or you pull into the garage or whatever.
You
so
just
that's,
can't hold it.
So that's definitely something to seek PT for. A lot of that is actually behavioral things that we'll teach. So it's down training the pelvic floor as well, but it's kind of retraining the mind to realize that you are in control of your bladder.
Oh, interesting. I was going to say, you just teach people that maybe they should go in the store before they get in the car on their way home.
Actually,
Obvi.
no,
You
that's
should
what's so funny. This one woman came to me and she said, I leak every single time I go to the gym and I can't make it to the bathroom in time. And I said, okay, well, how far do you live from the gym? And she said, 15 minutes. And I said, and do you go to the bathroom before you leave? And she said, yes. And I said, well, you have to tell yourself that you emptied your bladder and you don't have to go to the bathroom. So I taught her all this mental distraction and different techniques to use. And I said, the next time you go to the gym, I want you to do these things I'm telling you to do, and I want you to head straight for the treadmill and don't even think about the bathroom. And she came in and she said, I can't even believe it.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
Does that work on children? Like getting them not to have to go to the bathroom like the second you get to Target?
That's crazy.
right?
That's so crazy.
So that one in particular can be very much mind over matter.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would never have thought that.
And then there's the urge, and then you can't hold it. And then what about people who feel like they have to pee but then don't need to?
Good. That's another good one. That's typically an overly tightened pelvic floor.
Okay.
So there are muscles that go right next to the urethra and clitoris. They're more on the anterior part of the pelvic floor.
Okay.
And if those are tight, typically those are the ones that will give you a false urge to pee. So I always say, if you really feel like you have an intense urge and then you sit down to go to the bathroom and you can't go for at least 5 to 8 Mississippis, you didn't have a full bladder, an adequately full bladder
Right.
to tell you to go to the bathroom.
That's not just a shy pee.
And so that's your muscles like giving you false signals,
Yes.
or
Yes, exactly.
and then you just go in there and you help relax all that.
Yes. And then, speaking of which, just so you know, a lot of people have UTI-like symptoms. So they'll even sometimes have burning with peeing or feeling that increased urgency or frequency. And many of them have unfortunately been put on 3 to 4 rounds of antibiotics. And that's where I don't understand where, I can understand maybe trying a second one. But then beyond that, I would, if I was the doctor, start thinking maybe we need to look at the muscles, right? Especially if the culture is negative.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can have UTI-like symptoms, and it's just your pelvic floor
Yes.
getting angry at you.
Yes.
Wow.
I know.
So why, I mean, I guess we can get on our feminist soapbox. Like, why aren't our gynecologists, why aren't we teaching, why do we not know about any of this?
I don't know. Like I said, it is growing. And so there are a large number of doctors that really, really believe in it. I think, they send 1 or 2 and those patients go back and say how life-changing it was. And so they really get on board, which is great. I don't know why, because I feel like I've tried to get out there and market myself and maybe, even say some of these things. But even, there was one doctor once an OBGYN that I met with, and she even, when I explained that we can help sciatica during pregnancy and things like that, she blamed a lot of these symptoms on patients that have a history of sexual abuse, or said, well, they're just going to have these these pains, aches and pains during pregnancy. So
And this was
I
a
thought,
woman?
yes.
I mean, I had sciatica because I couldn't walk. Like, and I was not a
Well, I always say, what's the harm, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think we can only, if we don't see any dysfunction and we don't think we can help, then that's one thing. But usually it can only help.
Also, that's like
It's-
saying, oh, well, if that person was sexually abused, they don't deserve help.
Right.
Because that's the reason. So, oh, well. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's unfortunate. So I mean, the word is spreading and it's traveling, but I really should actually, you're making me think that I should talk to some of the newer grads coming out of school, specializing in like obstetrics, and asking them in, especially a newer grad, what are they taught? Because I went to a women's health conference up in Vail a number of years ago, and there's a doctor here in town that refers, and she's a urologist, and she really very much gets it, and is a huge proponent of pelvic floor physical therapy. And she spoke to a large number of colorectal doctors and urogynecologists and OBGYNs. And she said, before you start taking out organs, like before you do hysterectomies and you just blame these organs for a person's pain, she said, please just take your finger and palpate the wall of the pelvic floor. And if anything hurts, or recreates the pain, they really should see a pelvic floor physical therapist first. And I thought, wow, she gets it,
Yeah.
Right.
And all of these people in the room were really, so she's spreading the word, and the word is spreading, but I don't know why.
And can we do that? Like, can we feel and like figure out?
I'll help you. I'll feel it for you.
We've been talking about how gay we've been lately.
We're
I think
very
we
gay
should just shut
lately.
it down lately. But is there, can you do that? Like, can you
Yeah.
recognize or?
Yep. Sometimes I will, especially for someone who is a little bit more chronic with their symptoms, I will teach them if I've actually even taught partners before. So spouses have come in if they're open and willing to doing
Love
it,
that.
just to help, because obviously I realize it's hard to come in as often, busy moms, right? To come in as often as they want to. So it's nice to empower people, to teach them to be able to do it on their own.
Do their homework.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. So I don't know the delicate way to ask this, but a lot of people cannot do it doggy style, which is a totally gross way to refer to sex. I realize in this feminist age.
What's the other way?
I mean, I guess not. I mean,
there
but
a
isn't it
term for
weird? There
it?
should be another,
Yeah, no, you're right.
right?
Okay,
We
yeah.
just call it doggy style. And like, it's a very it's like the other part of sex is fine, but then I'm obviously talking about myself.
I was going to say, is this a thing that most people I don't
I'm
know.
so many women.
I'm like, can't name one. I can name one, and I know who she is, but I'm not going to say it.
well, the only reason I can't is because it hurts.
Right.
You know?
So if you think of the angling, it's a very much a different angle than
Yeah.
the traditional.
I mean, I'd love to, because sometimes you just want to turn around. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but does that have anything to do with your pelvic floor, or
That's
is that
the
just
question.
insertion?
Is this something therapy could help me with?
I would say more than likely, yes, it's a different aspect of your pelvic floor that's tight. So women who have tightness don't necessarily, it's not like the whole entire pelvic floor is tight. Usually it's just one aspect of it. So obviously I wouldn't know unless I assessed you, but I would say, like, from what you said, knowing that there's a history of low back pain.
I know. I think you're
that,
tight, Shay.
I've been saying it for years. I got a whole song about it.
So yes, I would say that likely it is the muscles.
Like, oh my gosh, like somebody could go in there and release that for me, and then I could like.
Go
God,
to
it really is
town.
gross
You
to
could
call
go
it
down to
doggy
Pound
style.
Town.
I could.
Can we just change it to Pound Town?
That's Pound Town is like reverse.
I don't know.
I don't know. There should
Seems
be a
more
better name.
proactive.
Is there a better
should be
name?
I don't, not that I know.
I mean, there's no scientific term for any sexual position, is there?
I mean, I just don't think doggy style is very scientific.
Well,
Why do we use
missionary
it?
is a little depressing
It
if you
is
really think about
depressing.
it. It's
We
like
should create our own set of.
let's do it.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, but people can be helped with that kind of stuff,
Yes.
because I understand,
Yes.
like, you know, there's tension or psychological tension, and sex in general is painful. But like, what if you really like sex, but there's just certain things you cannot do and you feel like, oh, well, I mean, I've always felt, all right, that's just me. I'm never going to be able to do it that way. But somebody like you could actually help me.
I would be able to tell you at least if I could after assessing you.
Uh-huh.
You know?
That's what you call it, assessing me.
Can I please watch when you assess Shayna? I can't even imagine the one-liners coming out of your mouth.
Right?
Like she won't be able to keep her mouth shut. So what's your vision for the world? Like if you could change the whole scope of feminine health, like what would it be? How would you want it to play out?
I think the biggest thing would be that mandatory, I mean, I hate to use that word, but mandatory, or that everyone is just given a referral for getting their pelvic floor assessed post-birth.
I mean, I think they do that in certain, like the birth center of Boulder, they do that.
Oh, do they?
I believe
But
so.
I bet your insurance won't cover it. I mean,
oh, that's a good question. Does insurance cover this?
I mean, this should be something that's like part of your checkup, like your
almost like a preventative thing.
Yeah, which it is. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you can prevent it, then you aren't going to have prolapse, and you're not going to need a hysterectomy or have your bladder sewed back up inside you, like so many women in their later years have to have happen.
True. Very true.
Which is just saving everyone money just to go to a delightful person like you and have their pelvic floor work done.
No one even checked me before I left the hospital, and I had stitches. No one even looked.
Oh,
obviously, because they left gauze inside me.
Right.
They just like.
Yeah, I think it's another person that can just really help support all that we're going through postpartum. Because yes, there's lactation consultants. I believe in them as well. They're wonderful. But I just think of how, you're going to your 6-week postpartum checkup with your OBGYN, which is also important. But at that point in time, that's a huge avenue. So if it's not with everybody, I would say at least at that visit, what I would love to see is if all of the proper questions are asked to screen for it, that at that point in time, the doctor is sending a referral if there's any lingering symptoms.
But do you know, I mean, are you really going to start leaking that early, or is this something that happens over time?
No, I think a lot of women start
like
leaking right
it's
away.
almost instant. Like the baby comes out and that's the end of that.
Is there any historical evidence that this was something that women took care of with each other in like
olden times,
in the caves, like?
No, not that I know of. I would say that because of the way that we're birthing babies now, and I think we've come full circle, and now you're hearing more about the hypnobirths and the more natural births in birthing positions. I think that puts our body in a little bit more of a natural position, which is how. I'm not saying that we didn't have pelvic floor issues back in the olden times, but
they were literally squatting and having a baby instead of laying on a bed
on your
table
back.
on your back. Oh,
Yes.
interesting.
Yes.
and that's the proper way to do it. You think?
Yeah, I think that.
Did you give birth like that?
I did not. You'd think that I would have, but
Well, it's intimidating. You go to a hospital and they tell you, and you don't want to. You don't want to fight for yourself.
I'm not one of those people that's going to fight. I did birth as long as I could. 2 of my 3, I had epidurals, but my last one, I was able to do it naturally. And I did do a lot of the different positions. So I took a natural childbirthing class, so I was able to be on the birthing ball and use even the bar above the bed and be in the tub, and all of those things helped a lot. But yeah, I think that if you look at the populations where they squat still now to pee. So I'm not saying you should hover above the toilet to pee, but in Taiwan, for instance, where they actually are squatting down.
Just like a hole in the ground, right?
Yep. There's almost next to no incidence of pelvic floor dysfunction or hip replacements.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think it's
toilets are killing us. Wow.
So I think that just going into that deep squatting position, and then think of how many times a day there's then standing up from that position.
Yeah.
That amount of strength that's required even just to do that is supportive. So our glutes, we didn't even talk about this, but our glutes are very important for supporting our pelvic floor. So sometimes our pelvic floor over contracts because those other muscles on the outside aren't doing their job adequately. So good glute strength is hugely important.
Gosh,
Jeez.
you've blown us away.
And then
Isn't there a lot?
there's a lot. And
There's a
then
lot.
pre-baby, just really quick, you know, as we're growing as women, like what should we be teaching our daughters? Anything? Or is this really something that you worry about post-baby?
I mean, really, I think I thought about this, and I think that with young kids, the main thing that I would be teaching them is helping them have good normal bladder habits early. But that is really about it, because I think it really just goes deeper than that in the sense that we just need to be empowering our daughters to be health advocates for themselves, and we need to all be proponents of our own health and keep asking the questions until we get the answers.
Well, you know, it's like if you hurt your neck, you go to a chiropractor or you go see your orthopedic
Or physical
doctor
therapist.
or physical therapist, right?
She's like, I'm right here, Shayna.
No, I know, but my point is, you have a hurt pelvis and you don't think there's anything for you.
That's exactly
and
right.
so simply just disseminating advocacy for
Yes,
yourself
yes.
is such a huge, I mean, I feel like it'll be a generational shift
Yes.
with our daughters, you know, like just what I've learned. I mean, I had both my babies in a hospital and, you know, on my back, but just, you know, my knowledge, even just from doing this podcast,
Sure.
you know, that I feel like I will have so many more resources available to my daughters.
Yes.
And so therefore,
Yes.
if we can all kind of expand our brains a little bit.
Well, I thought when we had Amanda Ogden on to talk about breastfeeding, she said something that was really awesome. And she said, you know, you've got the pediatricians and you've got the OB-GYNs and you've got the woman in the middle, but nobody is connecting all of the things. And even when you go, because I'm sitting here thinking, I don't even remember what we talked about in my 6-week postpartum. I was so a mess, but like they didn't really, what did they screen for? I don't know what they asked. They're
definitely screening for postpartum depression at that point.
I hope so, but I
Yes.
think I was, and I don't think that was really found out, but I was in such shock still from like my weird birth. And, you know, what are we like? They're just looking at the clinical aid. Okay, she had this, and this, but not looking at the whole thing, you know? And like, I guess like that's what you're saying is that we're not even asking if someone's leaking because we don't value it as an actual, first of all, a clue to something else being wrong, or that it actually is a problem and not just something we have to deal with, you know? And it's gotta be frustrating in your profession. It's why it's awesome that you're doing this, but it's also just frustrating for all these women, our mothers who've just had to put up with it their whole lives.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It almost, I hate to use this word, but it does make me angry at times, especially when I hear the stories of women coming in and how long I hear that they're suffering.
Yeah.
And no one told them. So
You should be angry. We should all be angry.
Yeah.
So the one that I told you about that had the 3 C-sections, it was only because she happened to go in for her annual checkup and her normal doctor wasn't there, and it was a PA that did her pap smear, and it happened to get brought up because a lot of times the pap smear itself is painful as well if you have painful
Why wouldn't it
intercourse.
be?
And so that particular woman, thank God, said you should go see a pelvic floor PT. But just to hear these stories of, like I said, just women suffering, the pain is where my passion is. I love to treat any dysfunction, but I really, really enjoy the patients that come in with pain because I feel like we can make changes pretty quick.
Well, and even when we first met a pelvic PT, 6 or 7 years ago, I thought it was this weird novelty thing. Like I didn't, you know what I mean? Like I was like, how weird, what a weird thing.
It's a one-off,
which is so ridiculous because
it's only for high maintenance women who have nothing else to do with themselves.
But my God, it's so not true. And I don't know why. I don't even know why my immediate reaction at the time was just like, wow, it was fascinating to me that people did that as their profession, but I never even thought twice about the fact that every woman actually needs it.
Yeah.
And so where is that disconnect, even in ourselves, you know, Tracy and I, who I feel like are pretty progressive.
Right.
You know, and just, it's taken us all these years to learn more and meet more women and meet more moms and understand everybody's issues.
Yes. And I think there's a lot of women actually that probably have been referred for it and have never gone because they're scared or they say, well, I'm not going to go do that.
Well, but it's also a money thing. If you don't, if your insurance, you know, and
insurance does cover it.
Does it?
Yeah.
It does? Okay, good. I was going to get on that bandwagon. Okay.
No,
that's
it's
nice. So you take insurance?
I am out of network with insurance. I chose to do that because of the unfortunate way healthcare has gone, where because of decreasing reimbursement from insurance companies, in order to maintain profit and be profitable, the visits were very short. And I literally felt like patients were coming in and I was telling them, because these are intimate things. And so people are wanting to talk quite a bit, which is great. But when you only have 30 minutes start to finish and they got to get undressed and dressed, and I'm trying to assess all of those external things, I literally was like, get on the table and you can talk to me as I'm looking at you. And I thought, this isn't why I became a PT. And so I am out of network with insurance, but I feel like women do so well because we have one-on-one visits for a full hour, sometimes an hour and a half. And you can cover a lot of ground.
And that just changes everything for women. It helps your marriage. It helps you as a mom. Your confidence, your back,
your doggy style,
your doggy style,
right?
Definitely helps your marriage.
But think about how that we're going through to care for our babies and the hormonal shifts and, all of these ups and downs that we're experiencing. And then on top of it, not be able to have intercourse with your husband because you're terrified of it or because it hurts so bad. It is not helpful to the whole scenario, right?
Right.
No. And also, you don't have to resign yourself to wearing Depends for the rest of your life.
Yes. And the statistics are really horrifying if you hear how much, even just in the United States, we're spending on Poise and Depends.
Oh, really?
Every year. It's really, really bad. And then the waste.
The waste
as
well.
Don't even get me started on that.
Right.
So what do you want to say to women? Just go find a pelvic floor?
Just don't be afraid of it. They're muscles just like any other part of our body. And it's not like a pap smear where you're in stirrups or anything like that. You're covered the whole time. And it's very comfortable. Even if you are having pain, like you said, it's actually surprisingly gentle. I mean, some people, will say, oh yeah, that definitely hurts, but we progress into it in a very, the pressure can start very, very small. And like I said, we can even start external, just trying to help the pelvis, because if the pelvis is more aligned, a lot of time the muscles follow.
And so if you're not in Denver, you just Google pelvic floor specialist. What do people look for?
Great question. Yes. You can Google pelvic floor physical therapy. I have taken a lot of my courses through an institute called Herman and Wallace Institute. And if you Google Herman and Wallace, you can go on their website and click on Find a Provider.
Okay.
And most people who have taken their courses are registered, and you just type in your zip code, and then voila, you have
Herman and Wallace, two dudes.
No, it's actually two women.
Okay, good.
Could have been last names.
And then the APTA, the American Physical Therapy Association, also has a list of women's health providers as well.
Okay.
So
Great, Leah. And we're going to put your information on our show notes as well. So anybody in the Denver area knows where to find you.
Great.
Thank you so much
for
joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I feel so honored to come, and I was so excited because it's another avenue to get the word out.
Absolutely. That's what we're here for, man.
That's great.
Helping our band of mothers.
Absolutely.
We're on tour. We're on tour.
We got a tour update.
Tour update. Tour update. We did not die. Good night.
We survived. We survived.
We did it. We made it through. We're done.
Yeah. That last couple weeks, it was like 10 days was a doozy.
It was a real rough one.
It was 5 cities. 7
but it was
shows.
7 shows.
Mm-hmm. Can we just talk about the Norse Knook for a second?
Can we talk about it?
We stopped at the Norse Knook in Owasso.
Oseo.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Oseo.
Was it Oseo, Archie? Osseo. Yeah.
We stopped at the Norse Knook in Osseo, Wisconsin, and Tracy had all the pie.
I did not have all the pie. I had 2 pies. 2 slices of pie. But
Archie had pie too.
This place was Scandinavian, and I am such a sucker for like the hand-painted billboard off the side of the highway in the middle of the country. Never gonna not want to pull off and see those.
And just to give you some context, we flew into St. Paul, Minneapolis, did the show in St. Paul on Thursday night, drove from St. Paul to Madison, Wisconsin. So this happened on the way to Madison.
Yeah.
And then did a show in Madison on Friday night, and then drove from Madison till Milwaukee on Saturday, did the show in Milwaukee on Saturday. And so on this road trip, outside of the amount of signs for cheese, so much cheese, hundreds, signs that were just like 100 different cheeses, exit 241.
Just exit for some cheese.
We saw the Norse Canuck
we
sign.
did. And it was, so the sign was great. And then it had a big blue ribbon that said award-winning pies. And I was like, people, this is where we're going for lunch.
Mm-hmm. It was delightful.
It was delightful. And we even got some DMs from some people that know it and know of it. So I had strawberry rhubarb pie and then ordered a butterscotch pie to go. And Archie had cherry pie, and Shay doesn't like pie, so she didn't get any party pooper.
Sorry. But then we had a nice, so the last show of the tour was at the Pabst, which is an incredible theater, and the men who run it are so lovely. And afterwards we went out for our end of tour martinis.
Mm-hmm.
We got to take Archie along on that journey. Ended up at another bar, and then got to sleep a little bit.
Yeah, we did not take the 6 a.m. flight home. We took the 12:45.
I know.
We were real indulgent.
The guilt of not seeing our families for that long was
to our
rough,
credit, we got home at 3 o'clock and we were actually able to function. So it ended up working out okay.
Right. I didn't have to come home and take like a nap. I could actually hang out with my kids.
I never get to do that, but yeah. But no, it was so fun. It was a fun trip. St. Paul, the Fitzgerald Theater, where they recorded Prairie Home Companion, lo those many years. So I nerded out hard on that. And Madison was great, and Milwaukee is always great. And what a wonderful, lovely way to end the tour.
So it's summer. We're going to keep up the podcast. We got a bunch of cool new episodes coming up for you guys, so stay tuned. And please follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and join our Band of Mothers Facebook group if you haven't already. It's a nice, safe space for
anything.
Lots of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And hope you're enjoying your summer so far, y'all.
Talk to you later.